Welcome to the Lovecraft Easing podcast and videocast. It's July 17th, 2016, and our guest today is author S.P. Miskowsi, ASP.
Hello.
Um, Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
And, well, let's do introductions real quick. Start with Salome and work our way over.
I'm Salome Jones. I'm the acquisitions editor at Ghostwoods Books.
Rick.
I'm Rick Lay. I've written books and articles on pulp heroes and pulp writers.
Kelly.
I'm Kelly Young. I'm the executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
And then Joe.
Over, writer, editor.
And I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraft Easing Press. So anyway, SP, thanks for sending us review copies of Stag and Flight and Muscadine. Is that right?
There are various ways to pronounce it, but I choose muscadines. Yeah.
Muscadine. Okay. All right. So for those who don't know who you are, can you maybe start from the beginning, how you got into writing and what you've written, that type of thing?
Well, I'm one of those writers who started really young. I mean, very young. When my mother used to go to the grocery store, she would buy these big tablets, these writing tablets, and bring them home because I was, before I could even read and write, I was trying to write stories. So she would bring home these notebooks and I would fill them with loops. And in my mind I was telling a story, but I didn't have the language for it yet. So that's, it's ingrained, something I always did. And I was always making up stories and, making little books and putting them together. I think a lot of writers do this as children. My parents got a big kick out of it. They never discouraged me. They always thought that it was funny. And I would write really horrific stories about a child my age, chopping up her family and burning them in the fireplace. And my mom thought it was hilarious. She thought this was really funny, and she would show off my books to neighbors, and so
Well, that's a great reaction, though, because I think some parents would cart the child off to the psychologist,
Yeah, well, I come from a very creative and kind of strange family, so yeah, they encouraged it, and they thought. Also, I think because my parents didn't have a college education, because they had worked really hard all their lives, and they didn't get to go in the direction they wanted to because they didn't get to pursue their education. They kind of felt that any reading or writing was good.
Yeah.
So at an early age, I mean, I think I read Rosemary's Baby when I was 9, and I read The Exorcist when I was 9 or 10, and I had read The Godfather when I was 11, and so they just never censored anything. They never told me what I should or shouldn't read. They would see me with a book and they would say, "Okay, keep reading." So I continued writing in high school, and then when I went to college, I sort of thought I needed to think about getting a job of some kind or a career of some kind. So I majored in psychology for a year. But then I ran into this high school friend on campus, and he invited me to this fiction writing workshop that he was part of. So I went to that, and it was absolutely brutal. I thought I was writing pretty decent little stories up to that point, but these people were really, really critical. And but it wasn't about, it wasn't ever personal. It was always about the work. And I think my work got a lot better there, and I started mailing stories out, and I got them published in some literary magazines. And so I took some of those stories and I put them all together into a little collection. I sent it off to somebody told me I should send it to the National Endowment for the Arts. I don't know. It might have been a teacher. I don't know who said that. But I did, and I received a fellowship for that collection of short stories. And so I just, I just kept on writing, and there was an agent that I met at a.
What does that mean? If I can stop you for a second, what does that mean? What exactly happened for you when you received the fellowship?
Well,
What
it
did
was
that entail?
$2,000. They give you a grant. They give you a fellowship, and it's just like there are no strings attached. You don't have to do anything. They read your work. They say they. I don't know how it works now. I haven't applied in years and years, but because I kind of think of it as a thing that people should do once or twice, in an area, and then leave to other writers to come along and get that opportunity. I just didn't feel like applying again. I got one for playwriting a little later on, but I never applied for the fiction writing fellowship again. It just means that they choose a certain number of people from each state. They look at your writing, they decide that you show promise, and they give you some money to help you out. And it helped me tremendously. It helped me to move to Seattle. It helped me to get into a graduate program. By that time, I kind of had the idea that I wanted to work in theater, and I started writing plays, and I took a playwriting class. And some people encouraged me, so I entered the graduate program at the University of Washington, and it was a 3-year program, and it was very competitive. They only let 3 people in each year, so I kind of felt like I really needed to commit to it if I was going to do it. Otherwise, I was wasting everybody's time. And so I threw myself into that. I studied theater. It was one of those programs where you don't get to just write. You have to do everything. You have to direct something. You have to act a little bit. You have to be a stage manager on a show. You have to be a production manager. You have to do all of these different things so that you get a sense of what is possible on stage and what is going to cost $10,000 and what's going to cost $140 and that kind of thing. So
that you're good at the overall picture.
Yeah,
basically.
and so that you can be practical. It's not meant to stifle your creativity, but some of my friends were writing plays that could only be staged if you had $120,000 to spare, right? And it just wasn't. It just wasn't practical. So that was a good experience. It was hard. It was really, really competitive, and so that was another tough experience. But I went on writing plays in Seattle because I got this playwriting fellowship as well. Connie Congdon and some other people judged it, and they wanted to recruit me to go to Brown, but I was already in the program, so they didn't talk to me, they talked to, because I would have gone to Brown in a heartbeat, but they talked to some other people in the department, and my professors all said, oh, she's already here, she's already studying here, so she's already in her 2nd year, so you can't do that. So I stuck with it, and I did fringe theater in Seattle for a while. I got some good opportunities. I got to do some workshops in New York. It was very nice. It was very interesting, but I kept feeling like I was losing track, like I was going further and further off track, that this wasn't really where I belonged, that this wasn't really my tribe. And so after a number of years, I started writing short stories again and trying to do that on a regular basis. And I found that this is what I understand, okay? I understand the relationship between the writer and the editor. I understand how to approach a publisher. I understand what that relationship is all about. And I never quite understood the relationships in theater. I didn't quite get the feedback that I was hoping for. People tended to either be much too respectful of the text, or they wanted to completely change everything. So they wanted to write their own plays. So you didn't get that middle ground where you get really critical responses from people that you can use to make your work better. At
Right.
least I didn't find that. So getting back into writing, I was getting notes from an editor, sending a story to someone who's putting together an anthology and having them, get back in touch with me. Now, I work with all kinds of different editors, and I'm perfectly happy with an editor who says, okay, I'm going to accept this or I'm not going to accept it. It will be exactly what I'm looking for or not. That's fine with me. But I also like the relationship where you get a set of notes back and you really have to go at it again. So I think that my writing is continuing to improve as I go along. I uh, I joined some, gosh, what were they called? Autonomy. Autonomy. It was an online writing group because I knew I needed some criticism again, getting back into writing fiction. And
Yeah.
so I wrote this novel, Knock Knock, and um, and the novel impressed a friend of mine who already had her book in circulation, and she introduced me to her agent. Her agent read the novel, liked it, thought she could do something with it. She shopped it around for a while, and we got very close at a couple of places. Like I think Penguin liked it a lot, but they kept coming back and saying, "So, what category do you think this goes in? Is it women's fiction? Is it
Yeah.
horror? Is
We
it?"
need to we need to we need to peg this somehow.
we
Yeah.
need we need to know how we can sell this thing. And we
Right.
kept, well, it's kind of all of those things, but and so finally they passed on it. And my agent said, you know what? Why don't you format this and put it up on Amazon as an ebook, and then let people know it's there, and see if an editor comes to you.
Oh, I
See if
didn't know you that Knock Knock came out that way.
yes,
Okay.
See if a small press editor takes an interest in it. Just let people know online that you have this book and see if they'll read it. And so that's what I did. And Kate Jones contacted me because we were Facebook friends already. We didn't know each other very well, but we were on one another's Facebook lists. She contacted me, said, I love this book and I would like to publish this book as a paperback. And what do you think about that? And I said, that's great. I would love to work with you because I had read some of her fiction already and I knew how talented she was. And so she said, well, I also wonder, I'm really interested in doing series. And so do you think you can, write more set in this same world? Are you interested in doing that? And I said, oh, as a matter of fact, I've been keeping all of these notebooks while I was writing the novel, and all of these stories kept kind of going off in different directions, but I kept tuning them out because they kept, pulling the story in too many different directions. But I have all of that material, and I said I have 3 stories that I could write that are related to this novel, and so that's when we started working on it. And I'll hold these up too. I like visual aids. So
Yeah.
So I wrote these novellas for Kate at Omnium Gatherum, and the first one was Delphine Dodd, which is a prequel to Knock Knock,
Hmm.
and and it's set in the same area, but it starts out in this kind of strange, spooky place in Washington that actually doesn't exist anymore. It's a giant rock where tribes, families used to bury their dead inside canoes, and this went on for many, many years, for centuries. And eventually the rock was completely obliterated. It was used for building material. It was blown up by European settlers who were trying to construct places, like Longview. Is one of the reasons that rock doesn't exist anymore, Longview, Washington. Um, because of the construction. So that was the prequel. And then there was one character in the book who ran away. She got completely fed up with what she was dealing with. She couldn't cope anymore. Her situation was too horrific. And so she just got in her car and she drove away. And we don't see her again in Knock Knock. And I had mapped out what happened to her, where she went, and what she did, and she actually drove to Astoria by way of Long Beach, and so that was the second novella. That's about the woman who runs away from Skilloot, Washington, goes off on her own, tries to have an adventure, but there's something wrong with her, and things keep turning out to be very strange and very complicated and scary. It's really about not being able to run away from your own demons. And then the
Well,
last,
I don't want to be. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to ask this real quick. I don't want to be Penguin and try to pigeonhole the world of Knock Knock. But if someone came up to you and said, "Hey, what's this book about?" Spoiler-free synopsis. And is it horror? Is it dark fantasy? What is it? What would you say to them?
I would say that it's horror, and I embrace that. I think that's great. I mean, I like horror, and I grew up with it, and didn't. It was only in college that I encountered people who differentiated between horror novels and mainstream literary. When I worked at a newspaper, we used to call it highbrow literary shit. It's just,
I'll buy that. Yeah, I agree with that.
so that was the first time I encountered people who were really adamant about separating the two. And
Yeah.
Before that, I loved horror, and I still do. I think that there's such a wide range of it. There's so much of it, and you can't really just describe it as one thing. You can't say it's all slasher. It's all
Yeah.
There's so many possibilities in horror.
And I'm sorry, you were going to say the third book before I interrupted you. You're going to tell us what
goes back to Skilloot, Washington, and it occurs about 5 years later, 5 years after the events of Knock Knock. So what I have is a prequel, a concurrent story with Knock Knock, or at least with the last portion of Knock Knock, and then a sequel. So those
should these be read in any particular order? Should they start with the prequel?
You could start with the prequel and then read the novel. I would say Knock Knock is your best route into this place.
Okay.
Read Knock Knock, then Delphine Dodd, and then Astoria, and this is the last time I'm going to hold these up, I swear. In the light, because I think you'll get the best reading experience from reading them in that order. But the whole thing is called the Skilloot Cycle, and it's about this town that I invented. It has a lot in common with the other towns around that area. My husband grew up in this area, so I spent a lot of time with my in-laws there, and I got a lot of the inspiration for the first book, Knock Knock, from my husband Corey's grandmother, Carol Lee. And I just wanted to dig into the mythology of the place, the history of the place and the mythology, and how these local legends develop and what happens to them over time. Like the local legends that you hear about in Knock Knock are developed further along in the final book, In the Light. You have a different generation coming to town. The town is starting to redevelop. There's a lot of real estate development at this point, and what was sort of old and spent and just lying there suddenly gets shaken up again. And so this little girl comes to live in Skilloot, and she has to deal with all of these legends, and all of these things start happening again.
Yeah. Joe,
Can I jump in here for a second?
Please.
You just asked us here to start, and I agree with her, Knock Knock, but I'd like to point out that not because I also think that the novel is so rich. Characters, her characterization is stunning. But Knock Knock was shortlisted for Shirley Jackson Award, and Peter Tennant in Black Static said that Delphine Dodd was his favorite, the best novella he read in, I think it was 2012, 2013. And Knock Knock was the best novel he read in any category. So it certainly received high praise, as it should have.
Thank you, Joe.
I,
Thank
I,
you.
I know in the community, whether it's Laird, whether it's Mike Griffin, whether it's me, we all absolutely just thought that Knock Knock was a phenomenal killer piece of work.
Thank you very
And
much.
absolutely, that's where I suggest everybody start. That's all. I just wanted to
It's
point
a
that out.
slow burn. It's a slow burn novel, a slow burn story,
Slow
and
burn,
it
but
takes time
once,
to
once,
become
once
read.
it gets going,
So
once it gets going, it does burn fairly rapidly.
I hope so.
Well, it
Well,
does. And I don't. And slow to burn is not a bad thing. It's like
no.
No, I like.
yeah,
I like.
we're building tension, and then all of a sudden we have an inferno, which is fabulous, you know. But again, the book received a lot of well-deserved praise. So
Yeah,
I
and I remember I've got too many books in my head, SP, but I remember
God.
I think I've read this at least 4 years ago, Knock Knock. And I seem to remember a scene right in the beginning that was just really, really creepy with the girl. Am I thinking of the right book? Girl hearing noises outside the house,
Outside the
uh,
trailer where she lives. Yeah.
outside the trailer. Yes, yeah,
Yeah. And
that
the
was
noises
very
start
well done.
traveling down the length of the trailer underneath. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But it's taken its time. I know you guys are going to talk about Amazon reviews later on and what the value of the number of reviews that you get and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Knock Knock has built. It's sort of reached an audience in its own time. I have been really, really fortunate and very pleased to get so much support from my colleagues and from writers that I respect very much, and from critics like Pete Tennant, who supported the book right away. But no matter how much support you get, no matter how much people talk up something, it can take a long time for it to work its way around. And so it's taken a long time for it to sort of build its audience. But I keep running into people now. Like I went to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, and I kept running into people who would say that they had read it and they were excited about it and they wanted to talk about it, and that they had just
That's a
realized
good feeling, I'm sure.
novellas that went along with it, and that they were starting to read those. And it's one of those books that people tell their friends about or buy for their friends, and that pleases me very much. I'm really, really, I'm always really touched and pleased when somebody comes up to me and says, "I turned my wife onto these books." And I'm always surprised at the number of guys in their 20s and 30s and 40s who, guys who just like these books, and their Knock Knock is all about a group of girlfriends. It's about a group of girls who grow up together in this small town and what their lives turn out to be, the promises they make when they're young and the things that come true and the things that don't come true, and how they're affected by these local legends. And so
but it doesn't read like a woman's book.
in the book.
I mean, the characters are so vivid. The book in its entirety is so well done. I guess I could, to some degree, understand your surprise, but just wasn't. And I know I'm not the norm, but it never occurred to me that this is a woman's book. I mean, yes, I could sense it was written by a woman. There was no doubt about that, but it didn't seem to me at all to be written for women.
Right.
If that's the right way to phrase it.
Right. I would.
Yeah. And its reception in the community by your peers. No one perceived it that way. we perceived it as here's another really wonderful storyteller entering our midst.
Very kind, Joe. Thank you very much. I just didn't know who would read it. I didn't know who was going to read it. Especially after that experience with the publishers, I kind of thought,
Yeah.
well, okay, so maybe they're right. I mean, I don't know what the audience is. Let's just go for it. But let's give a lot of credit to Kate Jones too. She just grabbed it and ran with it and was, and sent it to the people at the Shirley Jackson Awards, and she was really, and Laird Barron read it and was excited about it and was very encouraging. So, I mean, these people have just been really, really good to me.
Can you remind me the name of Kate's press?
Omnium Gatherum, and they're based.
Omnium Gatherum, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, these books. I mean, these novellas only exist because Kate Jones said, "Well, what else have you got? do you have a series?" So that's.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, her press has been doing really good work all along.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. She's got some terrific writers, and she publishes a lot of books. I don't know how she does it, but I'm really grateful to her. So. And
Yeah,
then,
because I know what that entails. You're right. She deserves a lot of credit for all that promotion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she was just very kind and very generous too. She just helped a lot in the whole process. And she's an amazing fiction editor. She's just incredible. If you read her fiction, you will find that she's a wonderful fiction writer, but she's also a terrific editor.
I want to get back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, because I think there's a great lesson there for small press publishers and editors and writers who are published by the small press. And you said something to the effect of, it not, I don't think catching on is the right phrase, but it started snowballing. I'm paraphrasing what you said. It didn't just hit its peak right at the beginning, and then patience, and a few years went by, and you're getting more and more people reading Knock Knock and the other associated books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of that is because of readers who have passed the book along to friends and family. They buy the book and they like it, and so they recommend it to somebody else. So a lot of it's been word of mouth. And then I started working on another novel, which I've almost finished revising, which is a very different setting. It's an urban setting. There's a supernatural element to it, but it's, it has a younger protagonist. It's very different from these books, but that's taken a little while. It's taken longer to complete that than I expected. And in the meanwhile, thanks to Joe Pulver and people like Laird Barron, I've had an opportunity to write short stories for a number of editors who have approached me, who said, they took a look at Knock Knock, maybe because Laird Barron recommended it or because Joe Pulver recommended it, and those guys would say, oh yeah, write to her, or consider her work for your anthology. And
Right.
Because of that, I've had some really good opportunities the past couple of years, and I've got work coming out in a number of anthologies, and a few have come out over the past year and a half. So that's
And
really
you're in Autumn Cthulhu. One of the reasons, I mean, I knew you obviously, somewhat, but Matt Carpenter gave me a copy of October Dreams 2 in, I think it was last Necronomicon, and I read it on the flight home, and you've got a story in there
yeah.
that I really, 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 really liked, and I'm like, I'm waiting for the plane, and I sent you a Facebook message.
I got an email from Robert Morrish, who said, Richard Chismer and I are putting together this anthology, and it's a second volume, a second set of stories. We wrote this. I don't know if you've heard of it, October Dreams. And I'm like, yeah, of course I have. And we're doing October Dreams 2. And so, I wanted to let you know and invite you to submit something. I was just stunned, and I sent him a story, and they accepted it. And I just was really, really pleased. I'm very pleased to be in the book. There are some heavyweights in there, and it's, I just called my sister and
There
I
are,
said,
there
I
are,
got
but yours.
an anthology with a reprinted Ray Bradbury story. Ah! So she was very excited about that.
That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
No, there are some heavyweights in that book, but you're almost more than anyone else's in October Dreams 2. Your story really jumped out at me. I really loved it. So, like I said, I remember. I think it was between flights, waiting for the second flight, sending you a Facebook message saying how much I liked the story. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, I liked it too, and I think I finally realized that there was a whole part of my experience that I could start to use. I mean, Knock Knock and those books took place in one world, but there's a different kind of story that I want to explore too, and I feel like I now have enough life experience. I've had enough time, and I've lived enough that I never really run out of material, and so being able to write these stories has been a great joy to me because the short story form is it, as far as I'm concerned. I love short stories. I'll buy a short story collection or an anthology before I'll buy a novel, and so I'm very pleased that I've gotten a chance to explore that and to get better, to write on a regular basis and to get better with my short stories.
well, speaking of short stories, I know that you told me ahead of time that you wanted to talk about your short story that's in Cassilda's Song and your short story that's in Autumn Cthulhu.
Oh, sure,
So,
sure. I was just, I want you guys to, talk a little bit, if you want to, about the anthologies and, your aim. But Autumn Cthulhu is doing incredibly well, and now Cassilda is up for a World Fantasy Award, and
yeah, that's right.
Selena Chambers' story is up for a World Fantasy Award, and I think Cassilda took a little while to catch on too. I think some people were very supportive in the beginning, but then it's kind of started to get more momentum, and we're recognizing it. That's very nice.
Yeah, by the way, for those who are watching, here's Cassilda's Song. And Joe, you can talk about it if you want it, and SP, you can talk about it. Tales inspired by Robert Chambers' King in Yellow mythos. Got a King in Yellow expert here. Joe edited that book. It's a great book, so definitely pick it up. But yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, SP can talk if she wants. There's a part of me that's opposed to anything, right? I don't want all black writers or all Martian writers or all women writers, because writers are writers. They're tall, they're short, they have glasses, they're blonde, they're bald, they're female, they're LGBT. I mean, writers are diverse. So I'd like to see a good mix. But when you read The King in Yellow, when you go back to Chambers' source, the original book, it opens with Castilda's Song. And, then we have the 4 stories Chambers wrote. I'll skip Darylist's King in Yellow adaptation. And when we get to Karl Edgar Wagner, he has predominantly the River of Nights Dreaming, which here's a very gifted writer and editor, but he's writing a story about women. And then you skip ahead to this Pulver fellow who's written more than a book's worth of King in Yellow material, and a lot of stories of mine, are about women. And it's always been, and I've bugged Ann Schrader over the decades for more and more King in Yellow poetry. Because it's Casilda's song, and she's such an important character in the play itself, I wanted to know what the hell Casilda had to say. What, you know, and I just thought Casilda's song is the perfect title, and being the addict that I am for King in Yellow material, I thought, yeah, all women telling the other side, whatever that may be, would be interesting. I don't think I'd ever do another all women or all anything book again, but that was one that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that I wouldn't do still the Song Volume 2, because, boy, there's a whole lot of unbelievably talented female writers out there that I didn't get to invite. I mean, I had my master list. I think there were 40 people on my list. By the time I got down to about 23 or 24, you know, just going in order, sending out the emails, I had heard back from enough people to fill the book, so I just stopped inviting. You know, and then crossed my fingers that nobody would get sick or whatever and be unable to deliver. I had, of course, read Knock Knock and was absolutely floored. I thought it was a major work. I think SP's characterization is, well, I hate her. Let's just say that. I hate her. She, you know, if she would just give me 10% of her talent, wouldn't hurt her to give me that. And it would help me great. But no, she's kind of greedy and keeps it all to herself. And
I'm reading a Joe Pullman manuscript right now, by the way, and it's magical. It's brilliant. So you don't need any help.
So there was a writer I absolutely had to have. And of course I was lucky enough, and she said she would and did, and she may want editors to step all over her work, but what she delivered I couldn't find any fault with. And I have a lot of red pens over here, and I'm not shy about stepping on things if they need them, but I didn't think it needed anything. I don't even think I asked for any word changes.
Well, it's kind of interesting. You know, you wanted to have this perspective from women, and the first thing that occurred to me in writing the story was that I wanted to tell it from a male perspective. The character in my story is very he's a critic who wants very much to be a tastemaker. He wants to be the person who tells what is good and what is bad, and he wants to destroy artists who don't meet his standards. So all of that, after reading the King in Yellow stories, I felt like that was a good match. I felt like that fit that world. And it was a really fun exploration to see just how far you could go with this person. Because, you know, no matter how egotistical a character is, no matter how arrogant a character is, they have to be grounded. They have to have human qualities that will make people want to keep reading. You don't have to like the character, but they have to be engaged, they have to be interested, they have to find something that they connect to so that they want to find out what's going to happen next, even if they want something bad to happen.
SP, I have a question from the audience. Thomas wants to know, here's his question. When you begin writing, do you think first of the place where these things take place or the persons involved and then put them in the location?
I think that I always start with point of view. So it has more to do with the character, and then the character sort of tells me where he is or where she is. There's something that emerges from what the character is trying to accomplish or what the character is trying to say. That and this is not always the case, but usually the character sort of the context for the character comes after that initial recognition of the character and who that person might be.
Well, he also says, knock, knock, it sounds fantastic. I think Knock Knock will be my next must-read. So,
Yay! I hope you enjoy
um,
it. I hope you enjoy it.
um, okay, so Autumn Cthulhu, you want to talk about what you had in mind there? Joe, do you have something to say? You're muted if you did. There
Yeah.
you go.
I don't know anybody who's read Knock Knock that didn't fall in love with the book and SP's writing. Not anyone. I mean, be it Laird, Mike Griffin, Justin Steele, me, whoever. Mike, you know how close this community is. You know how much we talk. Um, you know how important it is for us to play it forward. This is not. We all want to sell our own work, but this is not a competition. We don't see ourselves as in competition with each other. And we are all readers. We're like 16-year-old kids who just came home with from the record store. We got a great new record. We're absolutely in love with it, and we want to turn all our friends on because this is the best thing we heard, at least since last week. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the things with Knock Knock. Every like I said, everyone I know to a person said, "Oh, you love that, huh? Yeah. Oh, I'll have to pick that up." And they picked it up, and they too fell under SP's spell. And where
I love the fact that people get excited about the books that they read, that they're very passionate about the books that they read, because it's a very it's not like anything else. I mean, when you're reading a book, you really are just in communication with the person who wrote it. There's a connection between you. It's a very intimate experience, and people get very, very possessive of that, and so when I hear people arguing about books and getting wound up about books that they read years ago, and then somebody else is reading it and they think that their interpretation is not adequate or something, I just think that's great. I just think it's great that people care that much about the stories and the novels that they read.
Well, I perceive it as a tango. You wrote it, so you're leading, but I'm sitting there in my easy chair, and I'm your partner. It's a dance of two people. What you wanted to give me and what I take away from it. And I think it's that tightly focused that as we dance, we ignore everything around us. There's this music that goes back and forth, and that's all that exists. Where your music is leading.
Yeah.
And you play pretty good.
Thank you. I felt that way about books even when I was a child. The books that I loved, the books that I fell in love with, they, there was nothing like it, nothing that could replace that novel or that short story. Yeah.
Speaking of what you read when you were younger, because you said 8 you read this, 9 or 11 you read The Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
Were these things you sought out, or were these things sitting around the house?
They were not sitting around the house. They were readily available at the pharmacy, at the drugstore, and at the grocery store. They used to have racks and racks.
Oh yeah, the wire racks. I mean, I could go on and on about what I read off of wire racks.
They were at the drugstore. That seems to fit somehow, right?
yeah.
Well, they were drugs.
My mom would buy
Exactly.
a copy of Cosmopolitan magazine, and I would buy, the latest paperback. And and I bought books through the school program too. At school they
Oh
would let me
yeah.
buy books at a huge discount, and so I was always loading up on books at school. But this was a different, it was a different experience. It was more grown up to go to the drugstore or the grocery store with my mom and pick out a book and some bestseller and experience that because everybody was talking about it, or maybe it came out a few years ago and everybody had talked about it, and I was curious. So.
Were you a library kid too?
Yes, yeah, I did. I loved the library. I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, and we had a really good library, and it was a very inviting place, and they were very tolerant of kids, and so yeah, that was a really good experience too. But also my mom, when she went shopping, she would drop me off in the bookstore, and I would just sit down in one of the aisles and look at books until she came back to collect me, and then I would have a book in hand, and she would buy whatever it was. So.
Yeah, I was a library kid. Went to the library like at least twice a week usually.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and I remember when Danielle and I first got married 20 years ago, every time you went to the mall, the thing I would look forward to is the bookstore. You know, walk around and finally we get to the bookstore, so I'd be there for a long time. Now there's no bookstores in most of the malls.
Yeah.
So why would you go to the mall? There's no reason anymore.
Yeah. Just to cool off, the air conditioning.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
That's the only reason to go to the mall. Well, I guess I should talk about. Should I talk about Stag and Flight?
Yeah, Stag and Flight. I would love to know what gave you the idea for that little novella.
This was actually a story. The middle portion of it was like a sketch really that I had. It was very brief, and I'd had it for a long time, and I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where it fit in or what it was about. Just this guy going to see a therapist, and I wasn't really sure who he was. And then I was contacted by Sam at Dim Shores, and he said he asked me if I had something that would be a chapbook length, and I said I might. Let me take a look, and I went back to that little sketch and I started working with it. And the thing that I wanted to find out was who this guy is. I mean, why was he seeing this obviously terrible therapist? All right, she's really
Yeah,
not helping him at all.
yes.
And why is he there? And where does he come from? What is supposedly wrong with him that he ends up with this awful therapist? So it all sort of, I built out the story from that little sketch, and then Sam liked it, and he accepted it, and it became this. The thing that got me really excited about Stag and Flight and about Muscadines was that when the publishers approached me, they said, what we do is we pair you with an artist, and these will be fully illustrated. And I thought, this is just like a dream. I really wanted to do that. I was very, very anxious to do that. Many years ago, I helped my ex-husband, Mr. Miskowsi. I helped him with some of his publishing. He was a small press publisher. And I love books like this. I love it when a small press publisher puts the time and energy into creating something that's really special. Maybe it's a small run. Maybe it's a short run. Maybe there are only 150 copies or 200 copies or whatever. But it's an event, and it's a beautiful thing in itself. And the fact that I got to work with Nick Gucker is just...
Yeah, Nick's great.
Yeah. It's just the greatest thing. Nick Gucker made all of the art in this book, and then Matthew Revert designed the cover, and I couldn't be happier. I love this book. It's wonderful. I love the illustrations. Nick did such a beautiful job. And then when Dim Shores, when they send the book out, you get extras. You get a postcard of the artwork. You get these stickers. This is one of the illustrations from the back of the book. I don't know if you can.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I can see that.
This is a guy called Beetleman, and Nick is such a wonderful artist that he sort of finished the book for me. I mean, I kind of left it at a moment. I wanted to leave it at a moment where we were poised for something terrible to happen, and then Nick's last illustration after that event was this, which is sort of the full transformation of this man, his disintegration, because his experience with this therapist is so upsetting that he comes apart. He was just barely holding it together before, and now he comes
very just barely.
very barely. So you get this sticker when you order the book. You get some of these, and this image was used by Sam McCanna to make a T-shirt. So you can buy it on a T-shirt at Scurvy Ink, which was also very cool. I was really, really pleased.
Yeah, we're going to have Sam on the show on, I think it's August 21st. He's doing a great job.
He's terrific. Terrific. And then I had, a similar situation with Muscadines. Jordan contacted me and said that he wanted to do a book. Did I have something on hand along these lines?
Jordan Crawl, for those who don't know.
Yeah. And his press for this book was Dunham's Manor Press, and he has done a series of hardbacks that are illustrated. And he asked me if I would be interested in doing that and working with an artist, and he paired me up with Dave Felton. And so I've just been the luckiest writer in the world the last few months, because I got to work with Nick Gunther and Dave Felton.
I worked with Dave too, and he's here's one of his right here. I keep it back here. That's Dave Felton's work.
Yeah. I'll show you something from the book. I put this on here. I hope it works.
In fact, while you're looking for that, Dave Felton's one of the first guys who told me, for everybody listening later on iTunes and so forth, which I gained a hell of an audience when I did that, in addition to the regular audience. You can blame Dave Felton for what you're going through by listening to this podcast, because he's like, you should make it an audio podcast. That's great. I can see it fine.
Okay, good. That's one of the illustrations, and he's added a title to it. And then this one is not an illustration for the book, but it's sort of a movie poster version that he came up with, and I thought was kind of horrific. So
I've not seen one of his in color before. So
yeah.
He
uses a lot of red. He uses red for Muscadines, and I was very excited when I saw what he was coming up with. He also did some illustrations that were just like inspired by the book, but that were not illustrating events in the book, but they were just sort of inspired by the characters and the situations. And so I got to look at some of those too, but they didn't end up being in the book. But they told me a lot about how the story comes across.
And what's just a real quick spoiler-free synopsis of Muscadines?
Muscadines is set in 1960 in this dusty, sort of rundown area in Georgia, and it's a rural setting, and the setup is that this woman, Ruth Parker, has died, and now her grown-up daughters are reunited, and one of them has been living in the house that her mother inherited from her parents, and sort of running the place the way she wants to. Another one has gone off to the city and has had some strange adventures that we begin to, we get hints about them, but we don't know exactly what she's been up to. But we get the idea she's been up to no good. And then as these two women interact and kind of fight for the loyalty and control of the third sister, a lot of things start coming out about their upbringing, and we find out that Ruth Parker was in fact a very violent person. There are certain things that took place that the girls were forced to participate in that have scarred them. And so the question is whether they will be able to move on from the legacy of their mother or go back to what they know. And so there's some pretty horrific scenes in it, but I think there's some funny moments too. I think it's a strange story. It's a very strange story, and the characters
a lot of nice people wrote some very nice things about that. Laird I saw, and at least several others that I saw just in the arc that you sent me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
That it's been very nice. I specifically sent it to a couple of writers I know who live in or are from Georgia, because I wanted to make sure that I had caught that time and place, that I wasn't straying too far, that I wasn't putting my perspective from far away now onto these characters. And so
yeah, because that was well before your time.
Yeah, well, it's a little, yeah, it's my birth time. So, but I do remember the '60s. I do remember how much the South of my childhood, when we used to go and visit our relatives in the country, I remember how much it was like Flannery O'Connor's stories. I mean, she just nailed it. So that was fun too, to revisit that world.
Now, you've obviously learned so much about the craft of writing and dealing with editors and publishers. You sounds like a turning point for you was that first workshop, and
definitely
everything you've told me. Seems like you've had several turning points since then and learned a lot. For those beginning writers out there, do you have any advice for them?
Well, I have two contradictory pieces of advice.
Mm-hmm.
They sound contradictory, but they're really not. The first is to really believe in what you're doing, really hold on to it, believe in it, trust your instinct. The other is let other people read it and respond to it and find out what they think, even if it's harsh. And don't let that destroy you. Don't let that wreck you. Don't let that hurt your feelings. Remember that it's about the story and learning to be as good as you can be as a fiction writer, learning to tell the best stories that you can tell. You have the stories inside you. You have these stories in your soul and in your mind. And so, getting them on paper, getting them in some form that other people can read is very, very hard if you don't have feedback from other people. So it's important. It doesn't have to be a writing workshop. Maybe you know a writer who's more accomplished or more experienced than you are, and you will share your work with them and get some feedback. If it gets personal and they start trying to, tell you what kind of writer you should be, that sort of thing, then get out of there. Get away from them. But as long as they're focused on the writing, as long as they're focused on the story, making the story better, even if the criticism is harsh, you can take it, you can handle it, because you want to be a good writer. So be tenacious, but put your work out there and find out what people think so that you can improve.
So what about dealing with, those editors that are so hard to work with, like me and Joe, especially Joe?
You guys are great. You guys are great. Joe says Joe didn't make a lot of changes to that story, but he suggested a couple of things with my Madness of Dr. Caligari story that just really helped me to tighten that story up and make it much better. He touched upon a couple of things, very light touch, but he was, he was pointing at something that I needed to take some more time with. With you, I think when I sent you my story, I said, Mike, I'm not absolutely sure about the ending to this. I think this over-the-top ending, I think I might want it to be more ambiguous. And
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about it? And you said, you agreed with me. You said, I see what you're going for, and yes, I think the more explicit one could work. I think it's all right, but I think that if you go for ambiguity, it might be more interesting. It might take you somewhere else. And that's what made the story, was forcing myself to go back and create a more ambiguous ending, which wasn't vastly different from what I had, but the story had to take a slightly different turn at the very end. And this way, the reader has to decide how much of it is supernatural, how much of it is psychological.
Right.
Is this woman giving in to something that her father went through, or is this really happening? Everything that it's based on, everything that she has seen happening in her day-to-day life is real. It's true. But the thing that she sees, that all of this culminates in something that may or may not be true, may or may not be real. And I only got to that, I only found that because you said, yeah, I think I'd like for it to have more atmosphere, stronger atmosphere at the beginning and throughout, and I'd also, take a look at that and decide whether you want it to be ambiguous or not. And I think that final rewrite made the story work much better.
Well, it's a wonderful story. I think if I remember right, the other thing I did was we did a Kickstarter for this book, as I think most people know, so you were an extra goal in that Kickstarter, get SP Miskowsi, Robert Levy, Oren Gray, and we got all three of you. But because of that, I was able to, when you and I were talking about the story, I was able to send you a few of the other stories that were going to be in the book to give you more of a sense of the mood.
Yes, yeah. So I got a sneak peek, and it also told me where the bar was. And also it said, all right, I'm going to have to up my game a little bit. These are some great writers here. I think the world of Laird Barron's work. And Laird Barron, that story kicks my ass. And I thought, wow, if I could be in this book with this story, that'll be amazing. That would be a great thing.
Andy Kaufman, Creeping Through the Trees.
Yeah.
Great title, great story.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're in the book too. So, any last questions for SP, Joe, or anybody else?
What do you got coming?
Well, hopefully my agent won't throw this new novel back at me. I hope we find a publisher for it, and I hope that I can wrap it up in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's exciting. I'm really thrilled about the Madness of Dr. Caligari, Joe. Real excited about that, and very excited to have a story in. I've had several anthology stories come out this year. I should mention The Hyde Hotel, which was edited by James Everington and Dan Howard, and I like that book very much. It's kind of a slim volume. It's a British published anthology,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the only American in it. So they gave me a little badge and let me in for a little while, and I was very pleased.
It's called the Hyde Hotel.
The Hyde Hotel, Hy,
Okay.
and I like that very much. But there's also the Ramsey Campbell tribute anthology that
Right.
Joe has been
Yeah,
editing.
Joe's doing that one too.
Companions.
Yeah.
Yep. Edited by me and Scott. That's a wonderful tale you wrote for that.
I like it. I don't know.
thrilled
I don't
to
know how
have
people
you
are going to respond to
do
it. I'm very proud of it. I think I think it might be my best story. I really enjoyed writing it, and I tried so hard to write a story set in the time and place of the film, and I read so much. I did all of this research, I did all this reading, and I watched the film over and over again, and I watched a documentary about it, and I did all of these things. And then I ended up writing that tribute to you, Joe, and that's basically the one thing that came out of all of that that was set in that time and place. But the story itself ended up being set in a very different time and place, but playing with the same themes and the framing devices and the madness and the one person in the background who is in control, who is the puppet master. Those questions about who is making this happen.
Absolutely wonderful story. I'm over the moon to have it in the book. I really am. You hit a home run with that.
Thank you. I'm very proud to be in it. I'm proud to be part of the anthology.
So I don't know if you're. I don't know if you're staying or going. Either way is fine. But if you are going, because I want to ask everybody this, if you had to pick one horror book that's your absolute favorite of all time, which is a difficult question, could you do that? Do you have one?
I'm going to go back to an old classic. I'm going to say Frankenstein. It's that book continues to play with my imagination. It continues to influence me. The themes are enormous. It's a great book. I mean, there's so many great books. You know, The Haunting of Hill House, I Am Legend. Yeah, there are a lot of scary books that have influenced me. But I was at a library event where someone said, you know, Frankenstein is sort of known throughout our culture, and and it's it's not as well written as Dracula, so you don't really have to read it. And I thought, what?
In your opinion. That's the Big Lebowski would say. That's like your opinion, man.
Really? I never heard anybody say that Frankenstein wasn't as well written as Dracula. I would flip flop that absolutely.
Yeah, I'd make the opposite argument too.
Yeah.
I mean, Frankenstein is so multifaceted. My
and
word.
It's everything. It's influenced so many books, stories, films.
Yeah.
I wrote my first Frankenstein story very recently. Some people were getting together an anthology about monsters, and so I wrote my first mad scientist Frankenstein story, and it was very challenging, very challenging. I was scared going in because it's such an influential story. Anyway. Yeah.
You mentioned I Am Legend. I remember first encountering that book in a bookstore instead of the library, and I sat down in the bookstore, read the whole thing before I left the bookstore. I just couldn't put it down.
Mm-hmm.
Such a great book.
And such a great ending. Such a great ending that for some reason nobody can film or will film. I mean, the flip.
They sure botched it. Yeah.
It's That's why it's called I Am Legend. It's the last thing in the book, and nobody
Yeah,
doing it.
I I saw that in the movie at the end of the movie, and I thought, what the hell?
What the hell? Yeah.
I don't even know what else to say. Because what
Both
the hell?
hands. I don't know why. So
The Vincent Price ending was closer
yeah,
than the original.
yeah, yeah. That's as close as anybody's come.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, SP. Are you going to stick around, or do you need to go?
I need to go,
Okay.
but I did watch Stranger Things, and I'm glad you guys are going to talk about it because I'm going to watch this later on.
Okay, good.
Interested
It'll
to
be
hear-
spoiler free for those who are worried. So.
Okay, and
Yeah,
I'm
'cause I
bad
haven't had
about
a chance
bringing
to
up
see it,
spoilers, so
so.
I better go.
Well, thanks for being on the show, SP. It's always great to talk with you, and it's great seeing you again.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks, all of you guys. I really appreciate it, and I had a great time.
Yeah, it was
Talk to you
wonderful.
soon, I'm sure.
Wonderful.
Bye. Nice
I
to
watch
meet
you
you.
guys all the
Soon.
time. You're my favorite TV people, so I'll see you later.
See you later.
We'll talk
Talk to you
soon.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.
But
Yeah, I want to continue with this favorite horror book question. How about Kelly next? Could you pick one?
I would waffle between I Am Legend because that is one of my absolute favorites that I go back and reread, and Stephen King's The Shining is the other one that I've probably read that 20 times.
Yeah. Okay. Salme, do you have one?
I have to say, Brian Naughton's The Throne of Bones. I really love that book.
What about
I
you,
know
Joe?
it's not a novel, but it's cool.
But
No, whatever, any book, that's fine.
in a way, it reads novelish.
It does.
It's a quintessential book. I mean, back during Bob Price's Calum clubs, McNaughton used to show up from time to time, and I remember him reading a couple of those tales. They were just jaw-dropping.
And then the way they fit together makes it even more impressive. Just
Oh,
felt like so many surprises.
You have a
Uh-oh.
favorite, Joe?
good choice. I, I'm gonna go with one of the first horror novels I read that just altered my world completely. Um, and say Frankenstein. There was a classic illustrated comic I read Frankenstein when I was, I'll say 8, around there, and I loved it. And I knew there was a movie, but I hadn't seen the film yet. And I was 11 or 12. I think it was 11. And there was a copy of Frankenstein in one of those wire racks that SP was just talking about in the supermarket. And I went, oh my God, this novel? I don't know, I spent 65 cents for it or whatever, and thought, well, the comic was insanely good and cool, but this is amazing. And that's something I kept rereading and rereading, at 11, at 13, at 15, at 17, at 20, because I just felt there was so much in there. There was, as you mature, you're more receptive to different layers of what's going on. It's also a key part of why I don't differentiate between writers. Because when you pick the thing up, it says "man."
Oh, Joe froze. There he is.
So
Go
this
ahead.
is kid. He buys Frankenstein. He's just floored by it. He forever thinks it's one of the greatest things he's ever read. It was written by a woman. So a writer's a writer. Doesn't matter what the plumbing is. So I don't get that nowadays, where there's some people are resistant to female writers. A good writer is a good writer. A woman might bring aspects to something that a guy can't, perhaps. Depends on the skill of the writer, the vision of the writer too. But yeah, I got to go with Frankenstein.
Rick, what if you had to pick a favorite? What would you? Or did I ask you that already?
No, The Three Impostors by Arthur Machen, which technically is not a novel, but it is a series of short stories with a framing device. It's like one of those old horror movies, like Dr. Terror's House of Horrors and Robert Bloch's Asylum. And I read this. It came out in this edition from Adult Fantasy. I didn't know where the story was going. I had read one of the short stories, The Black Seal, which heavily influenced Lovecraft before, but I didn't realize it was part of an episodic novel, for want of a better explanation or better description. But that is an excellent book. It ends in a way I didn't expect it to.
Well, if I had to pick one, which again is hard to do, I would probably go with this one, The Man in the Picture by Susan Hill. A small novel. I don't know if it's short enough to be called a novella, but it's very, very good. I don't want to say too much about it. It's very atmospheric. It starts off with a older guy telling a younger guy the story of what happened to him, why this particular painting is hanging in his apartment, and there's a blizzard outside, and they're sitting in front of the fire with some whiskey talking about it. So it's a great story. It's, for those who don't know, Susan Hill. She wrote The Woman in Black, which was recently remade into a very good movie with the kid from Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah, great movie.
That cover reminds me of the Phantom of the Opera. It's got nothing to do with the Phantom of the Opera. Correct?
No. I'm not giving anything away. It's a ghost story. It says it right on the front. So.
Yeah.
All right. So now, Kelly and I are going to have a knockdown, drag out fight about Stranger Things. Right? Actually, I think we agree on almost everything. So again, we'll keep this spoiler-free. Kelly, you want to start? What do you think of Stranger Things?
Well, I think I liked it a great deal more than you did. But I also think that I am exactly the right age and grew up in the right area for this to really hit me on all cylinders. I thought the first couple of episodes were a little slow, but it really picked up for me, and it really plays on the nostalgia factor, for your love of the '80s. And I was that toothless kid with the baseball cap. So.
And look at you now.
I loved the font of the title. As the old Stephen King font that was on all of his books back then. The music felt very John Carpenter-ish to me, and
yes, it did.
And the entire thing felt like something King would have written in the '80s and Spielberg would have directed in the '80s.
Now, is this on Netflix?
Yes.
Yeah, it's only on Netflix.
So this is going to be an ongoing series.
I don't know about that.
Well, it's got 8 episodes for its first season, and depending on ratings, however Netflix figures that out, they'll decide if it's going to be an ongoing series. It is a single complete story, these 8 episodes.
I was about to say it'd be tough to do a second season and continue that story. I guess there's ways, but
They could pull an American Horror Story and make it an anthology series.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Kelly, you said the first couple episodes were slow. I've watched a number of BBC series that the first couple episodes were slow, but they were almost like a novel, setting things up atmospherically. I don't mind that at all.
That's how I feel about it, and I think that Netflix, with the ability to dump all episodes at once, they're not as worried about, a week by week. If you're not cooking on that first episode, you're going to lose a lot of viewers for that second episode, and Netflix doesn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I was just going to say, you mentioned like a novel. They actually, it's chapter one in the episodes. It's chapter one and then the name of the chapter. As if it's a novel. It's pretty cool.
And nowadays, with people binge watching, and you're watching 45, 50-minute episode, if the first couple are, preface, let's say, if we're building slow, that's not the kind of problem it is with a film, or, like you said, with a weekly television show where we have a single episode and we got to wait 7 days for the next episode. Because
yeah, I think both you guys are right, because I actually saw several Facebook comments along the lines of, if I had to wait a week, I'd probably drop this, but I'm pushing through since I don't. I think you guys are right on the money with that. My thoughts on Stranger Things. First of all, I did like it. So Kelly and I agree on, I think, just about everything on this. I liked the story. I grew up in the 80s too, although I wasn't really there, let's put it that way. And yeah, it's very nostalgic, great story. It just seemed very stretched. I told Kelly in a Facebook message while I was watching it that if it was a 2-hour movie, I would absolutely be in love with it. And this is not coming from a guy who minds. A slow burn can be very good done right. But, Kelly, even you told me it lagged a lot in the middle, not just the first 2 episodes. It very much felt like they were trying to fill those 8 episodes.
There was a lot of filler in there. I didn't mind it as much because those kids, the trio of kids who make up the main protagonists, they were just so good that I was just watching them. I was okay with its lagging in a few places. But yeah, they could have tightened up some of the stuff.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's take this exact story and set it in the 90s or the 60s. Would you have enjoyed it as much, hypothetically? I
don't know, and that's why I say that it plays on on your nostalgia. I feel very much like, and now I can't remember, is it the Duffer brothers that wrote
Duffer, I think.
Yeah. I just felt very much that they loved the early 80s and they wanted to make something that was of their childhood. And I'm saying that without knowing how old they are at all. They may be young guys, who knows. But I felt like they really captured, if you were born in the later 80s, you might think that the 80s was 1986 on, and we were all wearing neon, and we were listening to Poison and stuff like that. But if you were, born earlier, you remember that 83, we were still in the 70s back then. We were coming out of the energy crisis, and people were broke, and, my house looked far more like the kid who was abducted than his friend's house, which, they all lived in kind of a Spielbergian neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, we were struggling back in the early 80s, and so that kind of stuff really sunk in with me, and that may be why I loved it so much. But also, the only negative comments I've heard from my circle of friends come from one Mike Davis, executive editor of
I only put that because Joe said you had put, oh, you took it off.
I did.
You had put executive editor, so I wrote executive editor. No, yeah, no, and again, I'll repeat that I did like the story. And those little kids were great actors, did a great job. My only criticisms, like I said, is that it does feel stretched, and I think even the people who enjoy it, if I'm understanding you correctly, it does feel stretched, but you don't mind it because you're basking in that 80s atmosphere.
That's
Um,
fair to say, yeah.
yeah, and I thought it was for me at least very predictable. Starting with episode 2, I knew almost exactly everything that would happen almost through episode 8, and I was real close on almost everything, and that took a little bit of the fun out of it for me too.
I think that can be attributed to the nostalgia factor, though. They were telling a story that felt to me at various times like Firestarter or E.T. or Poltergeist, and there seemed to be some scenes that were lifted directly from any of those sources. So that could have been also
And a
why
few,
it felt.
and a few more that I won't name, so I won't give anything away.
But a lot of times we are tipping our hats to things that thrilled us to no end. I mean, it's part of our nature, I think, to want to tip your hat to this and that. Um, uh, I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, I've seen that kind of thing happen in other things, in films where you go, oh, that's that, and that's that, and that, they're
Yeah.
very. I mean, SP mentioned Caligari before, which is one of my obsessions, and is any number of things. It's like that would not exist without Caligari. That wouldn't, that they stole that out of Caligari. Look at that there. That. So I think it's just nature as a creator to want to slip in things that really thrilled you.
Well, sounds like Kelly's final verdict is both thumbs up, and my final verdict actually is I think almost everybody will enjoy it, and those are my only criticisms. So I'm definitely not giving it a big thumbs down or anything. And I'm wondering if Rick or Salome have seen it yet and have anything to say.
No, I haven't seen it, but it looks like you're describing it as good, not great.
That's about right. Yeah, I don't have horrible things to say about it at all.
I haven't seen it, and I don't know. Our Netflix is slightly different here, but we could check it out. We have Netflix. I'll put it on the list.
Okay. Then I think I just wanted to briefly let Kelly speak about this because he did so eloquently earlier in the week on Facebook about the Sea of Ash audiobook, which will be out in about a week and a half or so. I made some corrections based on you listening to it twice, and I really appreciate that. I know Scott will too.
Yeah, you surprised me with this. I didn't realize we were going to talk about this.
I know I like to spring things on you.
I'd be happy to gush all over this particular project of yours. It's the Sea of Ash audiobook. It's written by Scott Thomas, read by Lehman Kessler, and I just thought it was amazing. I've been sitting on the ebook in my iPad for, I don't know, maybe a year because I've got so much stuff to read, and then when you let me listen to this advanced copy, I put it on during work, and I was just enthralled the entire time. I thought Lehman did an absolutely wonderful job, and the story was so interesting and fascinating to me. And in fact, as soon as I finished it, I texted you and told you how much I loved it, and then we had a very long discussion about how much I loved it because I just wouldn't let it go. I loved it.
Well, that's encouraging, and I know it's encouraging for Scott, and he and Lehman deserve most of the praise. Scott because it's his story, and Lehman because he does such a great job telling the story, and I really feel that even if obviously I want people to buy it because it would be nice for Scott's pocketbook and mine, but um, leaving that aside, even if you've read the Sea of Ash, and especially if you love it, it really adds an added dimension hearing it read, and Lehman does so great with the different characters. They really are in different voices.
Yeah, I immediately got online and asked Lehman if he would just read everything from now on to me. I love his voice, and he did such a wonderful job with the characters. And then, like I told you, I literally, as soon as I was done listening to it, I started listening to it again, and I listened to the entire thing twice in one day.
Well, it comes in at about 2 hours and 15 minutes, so it's a novella, and I don't get to price it, but Audible told me it's probably going to be priced between $7 and $10 because they just go by. I think it doesn't even matter who you are. They just go by how long the audio book is and price it accordingly.
Now, that's a
So,
bargain as far as I'm concerned.
so yeah. Well, anyway, thanks for the feedback. You definitely helped correct a couple of things, and I know Stephen Smith did. And I'm sorry, my mind's going blank. Was it Matthew Bartlett? I think it was Matthew Bartlett, who gave me some feedback as well. So if you guys are watching or listening, I appreciate it very much because you guys did catch some things as well. Last thing on the world I want to do is listen to this on Audible 6 months from now and go, oh, crap! I should have waited for this to come out another 2 weeks and perfected it. So thanks. All right, so we were going to talk about, or I wanted to talk about. I keep hearing this. If you get at least 25 reviews on Amazon, then Amazon's robots love you. And I'm very interested in marketing and promotion. I've studied a long time, and I want to continue. I continue to study it because I don't want to pretend that I know everything. And things evolve. You got to keep learning. And I researched this, and it's just I don't see anything from Amazon at any time, anywhere, saying that that's the case. I saw on a lot of blogs, paraphrasing, but basically variations on this sentence. As you all know, when you get at least 25 reviews from Amazon, then, magical things happen, or Amazon helps you out a lot, or the bots do something. And it's always phrased as, everybody knows this, but I can't find any truth to it. I can't find any evidence for it. So, I don't know.
My thinking on it is that this was invented by someone as a way to get people to give them reviews. Because if you say, if I get this many reviews, something good will happen, it gives them something to work toward, and it makes you not feel like an ass for continually asking people to review your books. And then that was just out there, and it snowballed, and now everyone is like, this is true, even though there's no solid evidence. And
I think you could be right, yeah.
I don't disagree with you at all, Salome, because I have seen a couple of people say, oh, you know what, Amazon does this if you get that, and, so blah, Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I have no clue. I don't see any evidence of it. But I don't know. But indeed, I have seen people bandy this, throw this out there in an effort to garner more reviews. So,
well, Autumn Cthulhu now has 29 reviews. I don't see any. It's doing very well. I don't see any real difference in the sales. In other words, they didn't get appreciably better after we hit 25 reviews. And now John Langan's book, The Fisherman, who I posted about this earlier this week, I love very much. So far, I think it's got 7 or 8 reviews. It's a newer book. The reviews will keep coming in. His sales are you know, great. You know, I keep checking his Amazon stats because I want that book to do well, and I just don't think it matters. You know, obviously, when I say it doesn't matter, I mean this magical 25 point doesn't matter. Obviously, good reviews on Amazon do matter. You know, so
Well,
um,
they,
And
yeah,
we'd all like more positive reviews. The more, the better. But like on Amazon, you'll see customers who bought this also bought that, and
yeah, that's
then
very
along
important.
those lines. Um, I don't see things with 4 or 7 or 13 reviews. I mean, they show up on tons of those lists, along with things that got 57 reviews.
Right.
I don't. However, this thing is supposed to work, I don't see any evidence for it. It just, like Salome said, there's writers out there looking for more reviews. We all ask for them from time to time. I certainly do. Um, because Well, A, you work in the dark, you want to know. Or even if you're an editor, Mike, you want to know what readers, you already know what readers think ought to too, but more is better. If there's 5 new 5-star reviews, you can just sit back and go, yeah, I did do a great job. Thanks. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Um,
Right.
but I think using this as a flag, saying, "Oh, Amazon will kick me into high gear or whatever." I I think that's just.
It's
I don't see any evidence of it. It's just a way to try and make more reviews without looking like when I'm begging.
yeah. Oh, I was going to say something, but Salome, I think you were going to say something too. Go ahead, if you were.
no,
No.
I wasn't going to. I was going to. You just made me go and look at how many reviews various things had,
Oh,
because I wanted to see. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Sorry, distracting myself. um, I was going to say that the difference it makes is when someone comes to buy the book and they see that you have a lot of stars and a lot of reviews, they're like, "Oh, this must be a good
Yep.
book."
yeah. A lot of other people like it.
And,
There's
and,
maybe they're
and
onto
one
something.
and one other thing I'd like to say, because we all, is if there's a writer out there or an anthology out there that you really like, please, even a short review, because it helps to spread the word, and it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, especially for those writers who are working in the small press. Um, it helps. Like Salme just said, when somebody looks down and you got 33 positive reviews, oh wow, everybody likes this. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. Um, so your review is really supporting that writer that you like, or that small press you like, or that editor you like. Um, so please, you know,
And Joe, you mentioned readers who bought this book also bought this book, and there's another list readers who I think has looked at this book
right?
also looked at these. Those are really important, and there are ways to help, I won't say make it happen, but certainly help facilitate it happening. Um, so you know, Willie
Yeah,
Meikle, who I respect very much, told me today on Facebook when I posted about this. He said, "Well, I'm paraphrasing. He said something effective. I think you're probably right. One of my books hit 150 reviews, and I heard that was a magical number, and it did do better after that. But then again, it could be coincidence. So I don't think there's any magical number. So
yeah. I don't
um,
know.
I was there's an article I just put on the Easy message board from Huffington Post from October of last year, and the title, it's worth reading. The title is, it isn't Amazon that publishers should fear, it's BookBub. Um,
I'm sorry, book who?
BookBub, Book, B-U-B.
Never heard of it.
Casts doubt on the very premise of a publisher's promise that they know sellable work when they see it, and that they know how to market it once they've bought the rights. Over and over, BookBub, say that 5 times real fast, has taken the work of authors rejected by publishers as unsellable and turned them into bestsellers. I'm a prime example. And then he or she goes on to say why it was not a good experience. Basically, priced at 99 cents, sold 4,000 copies in 1 or 2 days, and then went back down to selling almost no copies. Anyway, I don't want to read this whole article, but it's worth reading. One other thing that's really interesting, we had a show about Charles Grant a few months back, and I don't know him. I became Facebook friends with him because of this. Neil Snowden has got a post. It's 10 years this September since we lost Charles L. Grant. To mark this anniversary, I'll be hosting a week-long blogathon celebrating his life and work. Charlie is too little talked about these days, and I want to see that change. So it's the blog. It doesn't start till September the 12th through the 18th. If you want to be involved, contact Neil Snowden. His blog is neilsnowdon.wordpress.com. That's neilsnowdon.wordpress.com. And I just bring this up because I'm a big fan of Charles Grant. And there's a writer out there who wants to be involved. Say what, Joe?
Brilliant editor.
Yeah.
And notable as hell in his time. But yeah, his name sadly is faded to the back burner.
Well, you know, he's one of the quiet horror guys I'm always talking about.
Yeah,
So.
and everybody knows how addicted you are to quiet horror, which is a good thing.
So, this has nothing to do with Lovecraft, as many things we talk about do not. I'm taking my dog Annie out a couple of weeks ago, and it's dusk, and I saw a UFO, and by UFO I literally mean unidentified flying object. And it was really weird. It's one of the weirdest things I've seen. And I'm a very skeptical person. I don't automatically assume something's a flying saucer or paranormal. You know, just because you don't know the answer to something doesn't mean you make up an answer. But it was about a quarter of the size of the moon, round, white, and it was just hovering. At first I thought it was a plane and the sun was reflecting on it. Then the sun was coming from the wrong way, and I just went down the checklist. I know it wasn't a satellite. I know how they move. And after it hovered for a while, then it went kind of back and forth slowly. There was no cloud cover, again, so it wasn't a spotlight. Absolutely, it's Texas. There was absolutely no cloud cover at all. And then it just got smaller and smaller, but I could just see it receding in the distance. It took like 30 minutes to do it, too. I don't know what the hell it was.
Could it have been a drone? Because those are new and you wouldn't know them that well.
That's a good point. But don't drones kind of fly like little planes, more or less in a straight line?
I guess.
But I thought drones had hovering ability, no?
I don't know.
I was thinking, since none of us is an expert on drones, if we saw one,
All right, let me ask a really dumb question. I'm Mike Davis's pizza delivery, and I'm going to deliver your pizza by drone. So it can't go
Not
this
in this
way
town.
from my house to your house. It's got to go up and then it's got to go over, and then it's got to come down. So up and down approximate hover because you have to move slowly this way, then you'd have to pause to go that way. So I would think hovering would be some aspect of it, no?
Yeah, I'm sure
And
you're
where the
right. The
hell
other
is
thing
my
is, though, this is
pizza,
such.
Davis? I ordered it like a half hour ago.
But this is one of those towns. It's not Dallas. You can't get a pizza delivered by drone. It's. So I don't know what it was.
Maybe,
I
I'm sure it
know, and I
wasn't
don't
a
know
maybe
who
somebody
processor.
delivered it,
experimenting with a drone.
Yeah.
You
but
get guys who fly them near the White House and things,
It was aliens. Don't be a downer.
That's it. Obviously, it was aliens. Yeah.
well, of course, aliens are checking out Davis's house all the time. He's got this Lovecraft zine. He's putting all this information on the internet. He's revealing all these secrets that they don't want out of the bag. He's been doing this for
I
years.
am.
He's like an Alex Jones, and they want to know what this guy's up to in case they got to come down and take care
Take
of
me
him.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
They want. Yeah, I'm a threat.
Let me get this straight, Mike. You had 30 minutes to go back into the house and grab your phone, which has a camera on it, and you just sat on this the entire time.
No, the weirdest thing is, I almost always take my phone out with me, and I didn't that night. And which is exactly what someone would say if they're trying to say, "I saw a UFO. It was definitely a flying saucer." But I really don't
That
care if
that
anyone thinks it's
proved it was
a flying
aliens
saucer or not.
because the
They were messing with my mind. Yeah.
aliens sent something to fog you mentally so you wouldn't carry your phone when you went outside, and then they could come down and do their reconnaissance, covertly.
To
That
fog me
proved it was
mentally, well,
aliens.
Christ, they must be doing it almost every day now. I wish they'd knock it off. Well, I actually did go back
Well, you
inside
have
as
you
soon
you
as my
just have
dog
to
would
take.
allow me to.
See, you
I
can do
went
what
back
I'm
inside and
telling
I
you.
looked out the window and I brought Logan and Danielle and they saw it too. But with this iPhone, there's no way I was going to catch it. I didn't even try. By that time, it was receding, and you'd basically be showing somebody this blurry photo. See, aliens.
I'm telling you, Davis, you have to do what I do. I have a tinfoil cap, and it really works.
This does not surprise me at all.
They're great, and they're cheap. You can stand up and walk into your kitchen. You open the aluminum foil. You rip off a piece that's, I don't know, like a foot long, and then you put it on top, and you just start bending and molding. Nothing can
Stylish
be
too.
better because it really adapts well to the contours of your skull. You're safer than hell.
All right. Do we have anything else to talk about? I'll take that as a no.
Uh-huh.
I can tell you the funniest thing the funniest experience I ever had with the tinfoil cap.
Okay.
All right.
That
This
made
should be
Joe
good.
laugh. Well, maybe it's not, possibly not as funny as I think it is. I was tweeting about how, I don't even remember why, but there was some crazy talk on the internet, and I said that there's going to be a spike in sales of tinfoil caps. And Reynolds Aluminum tweeted, "Hey, we can be your supplier of the aluminum foil."
Really?
Yes.
You got noticed by Reynolds Aluminum.
See, this is what the alien UFO phenomenon is all about. It's about selling tinfoil.
Yeah.
And
Reynolds is
I'm
behind it.
sure I'm gonna have to go snoop around in Alex Jones or something because, probably I don't know how old the company Reynolds Wrap is. What if Reynolds Wrap is behind a lot of these alien conspiracies just so people would buy Reynolds Wrap to make tinfoil hats?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Mike, you're into advertising and marketing. I could see a big company doing that. You know?
Well, I know that Kelly's gonna go have dinner with family and got to get going. So, I'm gonna give away a T-shirt. Matt's not here, but he's got that. This is size large, and it's a button-down. I think it's collared too, short sleeve. I can't remember. Something like that. It's not a T-shirt. HP Lovecraft Film Festival shirt. It's very nice. If large is your size, or you want to win this for someone who is in the large, then send an email to lovecraftezine.prizes@gmail.com sometime between now and the 24th of July, 2016. So if you're listening to this week, you can get in on this. And I'll choose somebody randomly next Sunday. So next Sunday we've got nobody, just a no guest show. And then
next Sunday we can talk more about the tinfoil hat.
right, next Sunday is the tinfoil hat show.
Salome, because you're in really tight with Reynolds Wrap, you have to model a tinfoil hat next Sunday.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks, guys, and thanks, everybody, for watching and listening, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Mike.